Welcome to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. Join your hosts, Anita Russell, Mavis Bauman, and Gail Hunter, as we create a brave space for conversations about racism, personal transformation, and accountability. Conversation provides a means to dive deeply into your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs, and examine what emerges in your words, actions, and behaviors. The show is a journey towards anti-racism by cultivating change within yourself first and then out into the world. Learn to engage in racial dialogue using 4 tools: courage, conversation, relationship, and accountability. Discover how truth, reconciliation, and healing can emerge from honest and deliberate conversations. Manifest social change right now on Inflection Point Podcast. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to the newest episode of Inflection Point Podcast. I'm your host, Anita Russell, and here's a quick hello from co-hosts Mavis and Gail.
Hi, I'm Mavis Bauman. Sorry, Gail. Happy spring, everybody. Go ahead, Gail.
So I'm Gail Hunter. It's good to see you, and welcome to Inflection Point Podcast. Sorry about my dog.
Mavis?
Hi, I'm Mavis Bauman. I thought I was already on. Hello again. Happy spring.
Excellent. So if you have been following along with Inflection Point Podcast, you know in the month of March, we've been talking about, we've been speaking from the topic of being Black globally. And so for this session, we're going to introduce a whole new question. And we have an incredible guest who is going to help us kind of walk through that question. And she's going to present what the answer to that question looks like through her life experiences. So the question is, what would it look like if we truly exercised the birthright to be Black and female? She added a whole nother dimension, but to be Black and female anywhere in the world. And so we are blessed to have Irijah Stennett. She's an author, a world traveler, and a yoga instructor. So she is the owner of Irie Travels. She is a certified YogaSkills Kemetic Yoga teacher, Pranic Energy Practitioner, fashion designer, and creator of Retreat to Freedom. Ms. Stennett is excited to teach everyone from kindergartners to seniors and continue building on her global yoga and wellness journey. She believes that travel is the best education. An infamous quote from Moroccan Scholar Ibn Battuta, and is currently pursuing her personal endeavors in international travel, fashion design, philanthropy, spending time with her grams, extended family, and growing international wellness community. So Irijah, welcome to our show, and it is such a pleasure to have you here. So if we could start off the conversation, just kind of giving us a sense of how this thing called travel plays out in your life.
Wow, that's a great way to start us out, right? So thank you again, Gail, Mavis, and you, Anita. It's truly an honor to be here. Travel. I've been traveling since I was a child. So I'll start it out as my parents. They opened this door of travel to me. As a young child, I traveled to Jamaica. My mom's family's from Jamaica, same as my dad. And so that was something that came very naturally to me. Fast forward to college, that's where it became this global experience where after I graduated college, during college, I took some friends to Jamaica. So that was eye-opening and traveling with other young women who hadn't traveled outside of the US before, and then taking them somewhere that I felt very comfortable to be in, right? And then fast forward after graduation, I had the first time to travel to Africa, and I went to Egypt. And, all I can say is that was 2008. So 20 countries later, and we're in 2020. So I feel really grateful to have traveled to several countries in Africa, throughout South America, the Caribbean, and it's so important to travel. So I'm grateful that you said that quote, which is one of my favorites. Travel is the best education. I was able to work with an organization called the International Youth Leadership Institute and take high school students to some countries in Africa and Latin America. So yes, we talk about birthright. It's our birthright to travel to these places, especially Africa, especially as a woman of color. And that's really how I've been looking at my experiences traveling, being a Black woman, dating and being single, and just how to navigate like what that looks like for me as someone who is confident and aware and still curious too about other people.
Excellent, excellent. You actually mentioned some organizations that you traveled with outside of the United States. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? So from what I gathered and some of the other things that I've read about you, it's the fact that you were traveling, but you were also traveling with young people. So can you tell us a little bit about that, and what was it that drew you to specifically becoming a part of organizations with young people traveling?
Yeah. So that organization is actually an organization that said my parents. My mother found out about that organization in the late 90s, the International Youth Leadership Institute. And it was founded in 1989 by Dr. Michael Webb, who has just recently transitioned, and Keith Brown. Now the executive director is Jadea Spencer, a phenomenal young woman who came through that organization as a student and advanced, over the last 10 years, to be the executive director. So what happens with that organization is that during the school year, we meet twice a month, and the students learn about community service. They learn about really what it looks like as far as being a global citizen, so international affairs, and how to see themselves in certain positions that they wouldn't necessarily see themselves or see as opportunities for them. And so some of our high school students have went on to become foreign service officers. They have went on to work for the CDC. It's just so many different things. And I think because they had this opportunity to go to countries like Egypt, to go to Mexico, to go to Brazil, Morocco. And these are some of the places that I've taken them, Tanzania, and even to Jamaica, to spend sometimes a month or sometimes 2 weeks in these countries, to do these deep ethnographies, surveys of the land, and then to give back and do service. And one of the great things is that we do get to connect to the embassy on the ground, so that they see themselves. And even if they don't see themselves, then they know they can represent, their, themselves, in these different types of careers and opportunities globally. Yes, it's been phenomenal to take students to these places, and they meet other, like that's another component. We have them meet other young people. So they have this like real cross-cultural exchange. And that's what it is, like study abroad for African-American, Latino students in high school. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah. So I just had one other thing that I wanted to ask you about, and then we'll turn it over to either Gail or Mavis. When we talked, as we were kind of preparing for this, one of the things that you said that really jumped out at me, and I'd really like you to speak to this, particularly from the standpoint of Black folks, right? And having access to travel. The statement that you made is that access is everything. So can you speak to that a little bit more when it comes to Black folks traveling throughout the world and going through these different places and having these different experiences? Why did you make that statement that access is everything?
It's two things, right? So my personal access, my experience of being, usually the only woman of color in the number of travel things that I've been fortunate to do. And even the founder of the organization, both the founders of the organization, they said the reason why they started IYLI was because they only saw themselves, two Black men amongst, a sea of, either Caucasian or Asian, but not people of color. And so I've had that same experience. And so and I realized there's something that just draws you to do something different, right? It just pushes you out. You don't want to sit on the corner anymore. You want to do something different. And so my mother found these organizations. It was because she had resources. She was watching a television program. It doesn't come on anymore, but it was Gil Noble, and I think it was like It Is, or something like that. And that's how she found out about IYLI. And so, yeah, it's because of her access, and even just the fact that there were different programs that I had access to that just expanded what I saw was possible, for myself. And like being from New York City, the 5 boroughs is huge here. Our population is huge. Brooklyn has over 3 million people, and there are certain countries that I've been to where that is their total population. And so, when I decided to like just step out of like, oh, I'm not just a part of New York City, but I have family in Jamaica. I have family in Panama. My mother was born in London. I'm like, oh, I have cousins there. So it's just like, oh, wow. Yeah, my mom made sure I had a passport, and then she put me in organizations to use my passport. And then I took it on and, decided to say, hey, I want to be a part of these organizations that are doing things globally. And then I saw that there weren't many people that looked like me. So yeah, I realized that it's important to be represented because I wanted my voice to be heard. I didn't want, there to be like, oh, well, we don't really know what's happening over there because no one's speaking for those people. And I realized that was an opportunity then to, not just speak for myself, right? Speak for others. So yeah, other Black women, other, just people of color in general, Caribbean women, it goes very, I'll stop.
Gail, did you have a question for
Irijah, hi. I know when we talked before that I didn't need to ask you if you experienced racism on all your travels in some of the different countries. And you said no, but you experienced it about being female. But I was wondering, what was it like to not feel that racism when you would travel to different countries? Because I know in the United States, you have to feel it. And I'm as sad as that is, and as much as I wish it wasn't so. But the difference is if you didn't experience that, what was that like for you?
Yeah, it was really good, to one, just kind of be welcomed in, maybe the countries that I traveled to were predominantly countries of color. So yeah, it felt really good. But then when I didn't sound like them, then of course I stuck out like a sore thumb, right? And then of course there were some places that I traveled to, and maybe I was, maybe we're predominantly a group of women in a country where men are mostly at the forefront. And so you have to kind of learn that like balance of like when to step forward and when to step back. And as a young woman, I didn't always know that. So I think I probably, was aggressive in situations where I probably could have been a little bit more soft and reflecting, in hindsight. But those are some of the things that I really kind of was like, oh, okay, this is brought to the forefront because that's just how this culture is and that's how they're socialized. Again, it felt good to be, in a place where it's like, okay, I'm not going to be like, singled out.
Irijah, I have a comment for you and a couple questions. To me, traveling, people going about the world, different kinds of people traveling all over, is a way towards peace. The more we know about each other, the more we stop judging each other and listening to the news and convicting someone without facts, So to me, it's just a delicious way to learn about each other and experience food and places and tastes and expressions and everything. So I'm guessing that you would second that. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Um,
Absolutely. And I talk about that because I feel like it's so important to travel, to meet new people, to start new friendships, to taste different foods, see
mm,
something that you may have read about and heard about as a child. Like, yeah, I going to Egypt as the first place that I went to was mind blowing because as a child, you see, maybe in my home we had these like tiny little triangle pyramids, and you
right.
go there and the structures are massive,
Massive.
right? And so, and then yeah, you eat the different foods, and they're like, oh yeah, we have falafels in Soho, and oh yeah, there's these just different types of oils and fragrances and spices, and so you learn too that certain destinations are known. Like, right, you go back a little bit into history and find out about like trade and exports and who was sending what where, and it's just like, oh wow, like there was something that was going on that we didn't know about. Like, oh yeah, I love leather in Morocco, but did you know that leather in Morocco was like,
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And just even having a taste for those things draws us together. Those lines start to disappear. I noticed in the foreword of your book that you felt that you were born with this sense of freedom. Um, I think in talking with my team too that we all kind of have that in us. But as you grew up, was there any particular thing that you wanted freedom from? And feel free to talk about a 9 to 5 job or or gray skies, because I identify with you there. I'm a little bit of an entrepreneur myself, and you mentioned that in that interview, and I thought, yeah, you did something about it. So what are your thoughts on
there's that.
Good for you.
Yeah, okay, so one, the hustle and bustle. And then once I was able like to use yoga to like kind of quell that, the second thing that I could not control is the weather. And so that is what I was just like, how do I balance where I spend my time? Because the cold weather really, brought my energy levels down. I
yeah.
wasn't as
Mhm.
productive. And so that was one of the things that really stuck out to me. And I was just like, okay, peace of mind has to include tropical weather.
Yeah.
And so that's what I was seeking.
Yeah. Yeah. Life is too short to spend 4 months in the dark here on the East Coast. And so I feel you. Definitely. Definitely.
Life
Um,
is much too short for that.
so
Yeah.
I think that's it for my questions now. I'm going to see what else pops up. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Right. So I'd like to switch the conversation a little bit and maybe dig a little bit into, because you find yourself or have found yourself in these situations where you may have been, in the minority in terms of your gender, or you're in the minority because of your race or your skin color and all of that. So when people find out, for example, people who have never been to the United States and they find out that you're from the United States, what are some of the questions that you get asked specifically about people of color in the United States? Because I know in part of our conversation, we started talking about culture and colorism trends and things like that. But I'd like to start that part of the conversation off with giving us a sense of what are the types of questions you might get asked when you're on your travels and you're the minority in whatever respect that minority might be.
Yeah, so it's very interesting because sometimes I've been asked questions like, where do I live? Do I have a backyard? Or, just in my like, do I have anybody that's a part of a gang, affiliate? Or, you know, yeah, that's sometimes like kind of the spectrum of, but even like you mentioned colorism, right? And so different places that I've traveled to, how I've seen like bleaching products and people who use bleach, right? Having spent considerable amount of time in Jamaica, I've had people approach me, in different types of contexts and say things about like lightening my skin tone or them liking my skin tone and that I've never done anything to my skin tone. And they thought that that was like, oh wow, you've never done anything. That's really nice. Like it's like the thing to do, So those are some things that kind of like stuck out to me, like colorism wise. And then though, yeah, just as far as like when people that I meet find out and hear my accent, they're like, oh, first of all, people have sometimes thought I was either from London or from Canada, but like not America, or they do think that I'm like from some Caribbean island. They don't expect me to be from like America. Like, oh, you're a Black woman from America and you speak educated or you speak properly, right? Because I even had some friends who like when I went to college and came back, they were like, why do you sound like that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And they're like, I'm like, people have manners, and not everyone is just always in a rush and ready to be so mean, which is like what New Yorkers are like known for. That they're mean and they're in a rush. And so, certain things, they're like, oh, you're different. You're
That's
not
our
what we
reputation. That's our reputation abroad, huh? Yeah. That's what TV shows, right?
That is what. And so a lot of times it's always based upon like what what they see in the media, a lot of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I listened to your another interview that you had done, and one of the things that you talked quite extensively kind of about Jamaican culture and all of that, and just how that dynamic kind of plays out and some of the stereotypes. One of the things that you mentioned is that people often have stereotypes about Jamaican culture, Jamaican people, and that it's a dangerous place, and just different things like that. So can you speak a little bit based, number one, on the fact that you are in fact Jamaican, but also the fact that you lived so long in the United States and then decided to move back to Jamaica. So if you could talk about kind of that cultural piece and how that matches up with people's stereotypes about Jamaica.
Yeah, so first of all, people know Jamaica as a vacation destination. And then people know the other side of Jamaica as like this dangerous place. So many movies have depicted it as like this either dangerous place, drugs and violence, and then you also have like infamous known Sandals Hotel chain or like the 7 Mile Beach and the Grill, like, and so what I like to say is that yes, I'm very fortunate to have family in Jamaica, to have been going there as a child, because I know that a lot of the time that it's the same, like you have violence everywhere you go. That's one, right? Like we cannot escape it. Like people say New York City's bad, right? And then when you get to New York City, people say, oh, you live in Brooklyn? Oh, you're from the Bronx? And it's just like, this violence is happening everywhere. So like once we kind of step back from that and you look at like what's really happening in the community, what kind of resources are they getting? And it's, their structure is different from ours, right? And so I think once you like are not thinking about the crime, it's not something like I feel like you're gonna experience that type of energy if that's something that you're around. Thankfully I've never been in any type of situation. I don't hang around people that are like scandalous or that type of behavior. So I feel very grateful. It's been easy for me to kind of go back again because I had the foundation of having family there and made some connections over the years. It's been very easy.
Sorry, interjecting a quick question. How does it feel emotionally to switch between the cultures? Because you're still going back and forth. I'm from Nebraska, which I say too often, but when I go back, I feel like a mutant. And when I come back here, I miss Nebraska. So do you go through that kind of multiple personality?
That's, you know what, possibly, because I find myself like, you know what it is really, I miss my family that is in like New York and are in different parts of America. But I don't necessarily like miss living in New York City. I probably like would move to another state if I did come back to America. Somewhere warm, preferably, remember, that's my peace of mind, right? So No, I don't necessarily miss New York. And when I'm in Jamaica, one of the things, and I think this is something too, like whatever new country you travel to, or maybe someplace that you're familiar with, and being there and staying there for a significant amount of time, you explore, right? You go to some of these places that people talk about, or that I haven't been to since I was a child, and so I feel like that like level of discovery for me is very vast and it's just exciting. Whereas like being, somewhere that I'm mostly familiar with, having spent so much time in the
Yeah.
States, I'm not so, I'm encouraged, right? Because when I come back, I'm like, oh, let's go somewhere new. Let's not go back to New York, right? Let's go somewhere new.
Sure, sure. You're curious always.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I've spent so much time in New York City. Even living in DC for almost 8 years, right? I was in DC for about 8 years.
Mm,
So
mm.
I feel that I'm just I've had my time with New York. It's a different New York that I'm coming back to, and I say that every time. It's not like what it used
Mm,
to be.
mm.
Well, Irijah, we're gonna take a quick break, and then we're gonna come back and continue the conversation. We'll be right back in a minute or two. So welcome back to Inflection Point Podcast on Transformation Talk Radio. We have been speaking from the topic of being Black globally, and specifically the question that we're entertaining is, what would it look like if we truly exercise our birthright to be free and female anywhere? And we have an incredible guest, Irijah Stennett, and I'm going to kind of open up the conversation now by talking a little bit about this concept of self-identification. So when you think about us as Black folks living in America or wherever it is that we are living in the diaspora, there's a self-identification piece that's always linked to us, particularly when you think in terms of systemic racism, structural racism, and things along those lines. But having that strong sense of identification is one of the things that helps us to remain resilient. And so I'd like Irijah to kind of talk a little bit about that self-identification, because it sounds like to me that that is one of your keys to success.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I will take that. One of my keys to success. Um, I think it really just started with um, becoming aware, right? We're each of us are unique. Each and every one of us are unique. And when I was able, because I've always, I guess, feel like I've been a little different from everyone else. I was usually the only one in the class with natural hair, my locks. I've never had them straightened or anything like that. And then, so I've always felt the need to kind of just make sure I knew who I was, and I wasn't always trying to um, be like anyone else, right? Um, because of that, I guess I just am like, because of that, people around me just kind of we were all different, right? And I felt like I was always around people who knew themselves. And so because of that, like I just felt like I knew who I was in the world. I never really questioned who I was. What I questioned most is, why doesn't everyone else know who they are? Right? Like we're moving so fast, but like yoga teaches us to slow down, to breathe. And
Mhm.
so it was like when I had to slow down to breathe, because I felt like I was in a space where I was undervalued, I was underpaid. I was like, I need to slow down and discover who I really am. And actually, going very far back when I just graduated from Howard University and I was studying for my physician assistant licensing exam, I remember my director, Dr. Marvin Barnard, he said to me, I didn't pass the first time. And so he said to me, take some time. He's like, I want you to get back and remember who Miss Stennett is. And it always, anytime, like I didn't pass the next time and I didn't pass it, and I was like, you know what? Let me take a pause and be still. And so anytime like I've been in a space where it's just been like too much, I've had to like step back and say, who is Miss Stennett, right? How am I like, where's my purpose in this matter that I'm experiencing right now, or how do I need to redirect it? And I don't always know, like, I know it probably sounds like I did, but I didn't always know that that's what I was doing. But it was this like very paused reflection and getting back to knowing like who I was, like what have my parents taught me, you know, what have my mentors showed me, what have I showed myself that I really want, you know, to experience. And so when we go back to freedom, it was like this peace of mind. Like I just felt very anxious in certain environments. And travel was one of those times where I was like most, you know, happy and all of those like good feelings. And it was when I was most productive, right? Like going to 20 different countries, that's like the most productive part of my life. Traveling and having other people traveling. So yeah, it led into me doing the Retreat to Freedom, which then you know, I'm so grateful after 4 retreats, then had a moment to pause again. And actually, after my third retreat, I paused because I think it was like that pandemic session. And so I had the time to write this book, 38 Ways to Discover Freedom, because I was transitioning into my 38th birth year. And I just felt that this was a time for me to pause and stop, like remember who I am, like what have I learned up until now. And I'm grateful to have actually been in a circle of friends, this group of sisters called the Fast Girls. And I was a part of a writing circle. And each of them, maybe not everyone had written a book, but they were writing pieces of literature for magazines or whatever, you know. And so I was really encouraged to share some things that I had been writing. And that really birthed 38 Ways to Discover Freedom, because I had been on this freedom journey and discovering like what that meant for me, and having other people, other women, other men, you know, be a part of that journey and them discovering what it was for them. So yeah.
Excellent. I love the way you connect the word freedom to breathing. Yeah. I think that's really awesome. There's a woman that I know, her name is Dr. Beatrice Vassar, and she wrote, she has a book, it's a collection of poems, and it's called Black Mandemic, but she has a poem in there that's called The Breath of Life. And there's two things that I wanted to share with you from that poem, not the entire poem, but there's two lines in that poem. A baby's first breath denotes the beginning of life. And then she talks about the freedom to breathe without consent. And so the way that you connected those two together, when I heard you say that the first time, it made me think of this poem that Dr. Vassar had written. And then it made me also think about George Floyd, because that whole I can't breathe, I am begging for the freedom for somebody else to give me the consent that I can breathe. And so when you say those words, that's what kind of that's how it kind of all comes together for me.
It's such a basic right. It's a basic right to breathe.
It's a right that should never be taken from one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's the right that we always have. No one has a right to take that. Yeah.
I just think it's beautiful the way that's tied freedom and this idea of breathing. I mean, you think about the baby coming into the life, they're coming into a freedom that they haven't experienced before, because they've been kind of curled up in this little itty bitty space, and all of a sudden they're here. And that denotes freedom, right? And they take that first breath. That is such a beautiful way to kind of connect the two together. And so now that we're talking about this idea of freedom, something that I picked up from your book, Irijah, is the 16th way to discover freedom. And that is, I mean, I'm actually planning on doing this. Write a freedom declaration to yourself. I think that is such a wonderful concept. And it's talking about what are those things that I want to be free of, whether it's debt or anger, regret, whatever, things that I might hold towards myself that I want to get rid of, or towards other human beings that we need to get rid of. So when we think about this idea of eradicating racism, that's one of those things. We need to be free from that. The constraints of racism, because racism is constraining on everybody. And we need to be free from that. So I kind of picked up this notion of how you look at freedom and this concept of breathing and all of that. And so, yeah, it's just really great the way you connect those two together. Gail, Mavis, any comments?
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, the breath is the access to life energy, right? It allows that to flow. And I love how you talk about your identity as far as knowing who you are and taking that time and taking the breath and taking the moment to just be quiet or calm. And it's not about creating who you are, it's about remembering who you are, right?
Yes.
That I am who you are, that you came here to be, and you have experienced that in amazing ways. You really have. I was wondering what's your favorite freedom out of those 38? Which one do you like the most?
Tell me it's not jumping off a cliff.
Okay, so that's the two, right? Jumping off the cliff and travel. Jumping off the cliff and travel. Yeah, those are my two favorites. And you know what? So just recently, actually, probably about a month ago, maybe less, maybe about 3 weeks ago, I jumped 25 feet off of the blue hole into the cave, 25 feet into 35 deep water.
Whoa.
Yeah. And I'm telling you, I did it twice.
Uh-huh.
How do you get out?
There's a ladder and you climb back up, but it was so exhilarating. It was so exhilarating. And there's nothing like that. There's nothing like it. Yeah, there's nothing like it.
Well, if I come to Jamaica, I'll hold your purse while you do that. I get the idea. I get the idea of letting go in order to be free, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know what it was too? I used to be very afraid of water, and I'm not the best swimmer. I'm probably one of the best floaters. And so for me, it's a way to like get over this. I love water. And so it helps me to like get over, it helps me to connect greater with water. Like water and I are one. Water is not gonna like swallow me. It's not gonna kill me. Water and I are one. And so I think that helps me, like the jumping part really helped me to like get over that fear. And then, you know, when you come, we have little spots if it's 3 feet or 11 feet, you know.
I can work my way up. Okay.
You can work your way up. You know, and then I have friends who just make it look so easy. And I've had a brother that did it, and I've gone there several times. So it was like, okay, after the 10th time of going here, you're gonna have to jump it. You know, so it was like one of those things where it was like I had been going there for at least 3 years and never did it, and it was just like you're gonna do it.
Yeah, it comes a time. You know,
that's what it is. There comes a time when you tell yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also noticed that you talk about your anxiety historically, and that I find it a little validating because that anxiety has moved you toward who you really want to be. It seems. Would you agree with that? That we aren't inspired to change anything if we don't feel a little bit of pain, anxiety, curiosity, all of those things. But it looks like you're also a type of person who will throw herself head first into something that causes you anxiety. Now you're smiling, you must be agreeing. Is that right?
It's so interesting to hear it said back to you. I'm like, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you know, I guess there's this part that's just like I'm not supposed to fear. Not say I'm not supposed to fear or anything, but you know, part of my book too says fear is false evidence appearing real.
Yeah.
Right. And so when I go back to like, what am I really afraid of? You know, then it goes back to like my faith. God always got my back. Never, nothing. You know, in that way I'm covered, right? And so it's just like another. It's a personal task. You know, sometimes for myself, you know, it's just to kind of see like, yeah, how far am I willing to go to, you know, be that best version of myself, to experience life fully. And I think that's what it's about, experiencing life fully, because yeah, maybe there's been times in my life where I wasn't so bold, and when I wasn't living
Right.
life so fully, or I was following someone else's plan.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You
So
found
yeah,
a way
it
to
might
follow your plan.
yeah, right. It comes a time, like I always hear people say, like, oh yeah, as I got older, like I stopped caring about, what other people think. And I'm thinking, like, I don't want to wait till I get older to stop caring, like, because we live like our lives caring so
Yeah.
much, like
Mhm.
about what other people say, or, like their judgments of us. And I think that goes back to the anxiety, like, right, like how do I shift that so that I'm the one who cares about like what I look like, what I'm doing in my life, because it's my life,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Right. I
I
heard someone
love
say
that.
on an event last night that what somebody else thinks about me is none of my business. Right.
Mhm.
So I don't want to attach to that. Right. So that's okay. You can keep it to yourself. But the other thing is that what you're talking about is that when we step into what we are afraid of, fear goes away because we stepped into it with a belief about ourselves and a love of ourselves that says, I can and I will and I am. And that's what you're describing. And then fear isn't there. Right.
Yeah, and I even say sometimes I can, I will, I shall.
Yes.
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 I love that you just said that.
Yes.
Thank you for that reminder.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. And so when I think about Irijah, you haven't really been with us since the very beginning, but one of the things that prompted this work that we're doing in terms of the podcast is my grandson. I have a grandson, Cairo. He just turned 2 years old. And the experience with George Floyd, and then an experience that my daughters had when they went out for a protest, a Black Lives Matter protest, and my daughter had asked me if I thought that her son Cairo, who at the time was literally just 3 months old, was going to have to protest in his lifetime for the birthright to freely and peacefully exist in the skin in which he was born. And so that question has become such a foundation for the way that I live my life, for the way that I created this podcast, for the way that I frame up conversations leaning towards anti-racism and all of that. And so as I listen to you, you're kind of validating that question and validating the answer to that question, which is, if we put our faith in a different future, he will not have to protest. And it takes us putting our different faith in a different future within ourselves. So as you were telling your story, you talked about those times when there were fears that you had, and you were sort of trying to define yourself within the context of other people. But then there came a moment when you decided that your self-identification was way more valuable than all of that. And that is the very thing that I hope and pray for Cairo, so that he will not have to protest, that his way of walking down the street, just freely clapping his hands when he feels like it, and all of that, that just becomes a part of who he is as he continues to grow. So we were literally out of time, and I want to make sure, Irijah, that you have enough time to call out websites and your book. Go to Amazon, whatever it is you want to call out, so that people know how they can contact with you, get your book, maybe have a conversation, come to your yoga retreat and all of that.
Okay, so first, again, thank you so much. Yes, you can find out more about how to get in contact with me by going on IrieTravels.com, IRIE like Irie, Travels, TRAVELS.com. And actually, if you go to the contact page, that's the best way to get in contact with me. You can click on one of the different ways if you want to talk about yoga sessions, pranic energy sessions, if you want to talk about me hosting a retreat, a private retreat. All of those options are there. Send me a message and I will get back to you. And right now, anyone who's listening, we are offering a special, so if you clip that you heard this here, then I'll get back to you and you'll get a free 30-minute Kemetic Yoga meditation session.
Virtually?
Virtually, that's right.
I want that.
Sign me out.
I'm in.
Right.
Let's do the three of us.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I mean, basically, the website is the best way to get in contact with me. But I am on social media on Instagram, Irie_Jah, JAH. And then if you put my first and last name on Instagram or LinkedIn, I'm also on those platforms as well.
We missed you for a second or two.
Yeah. Can you hear me now?
You're good now.
You're good, yeah.
Okay, good. What was the last thing you heard? I heard, yeah, I think I said the social media links, correct?
Right. Yes. Yes.
Instagram, Facebook,
Yes, and
Right,
LinkedIn.
yeah.
and LinkedIn. Okay.
LinkedIn. Excellent. So, Mavis, if you want to kind of give your little shout out, your call to action for the work that you do.
Sure. I feel a little humble right now in front of this Renaissance woman, but I will do my best. I manage a nonprofit called Seed a Better Life. It is an organization that was built for the benefit of feeding and educating people, genocide survivors, and other people impacted by the 1994 genocide in Rwanda. And every time we have these discussions, I reflect more on the struggles there in terms of groups not understanding each other, groups not getting along well, which in Rwanda is an understatement. But we can travel and we can get to know each other. So thank you for inspiring me there. Anyone who wants to know more about Seed can go to seedabetterlife.org. And I have a contact email that's right on the homepage too. I'd love to hear from anybody who has a question. Thanks, Anita.
Excellent. You're welcome. I actually have an article that I found earlier today that I want to send to you. It's an article where they're talking about the idea of reconciliation after the genocide in Rwanda. So,
oh, please. Yeah.
Absolutely. Gail?
Well, I am a psychotherapist in private practice, but I also am the president of OMA, Center for Mind, Body, and Spirit in Pittsburgh. And the website is www.oma.pittsburgh.org. And we have a youth program that we offer during the summer and throughout the year. We offer for the kids in the city, in the east end of the city, and it's called Art in the Garden. We have a couple trauma programs that we offer. We have a trauma-informed training that we do for organizations and for teachers. So we are working on trying to build and grow the organization so we can expand the services. We also do a lecture series where we highlight holistic practitioners. So the goal is to be able to provide those opportunities for everybody to be able to access what they may not be able to afford, and so that we all have the opportunity to grow and to heal.
Yeah.
Excellent. And of course, I am Anita Russell, and I am the founder and the CEO of The Place to Soar. And The Place to Soar is my baby that I birthed after I came out of corporate America. Irijah mentioned earlier about God. He opened up this whole new path for me when he pulled me out of corporate America. And the life that I live now in terms of transformational coaching and writing and speaking and all of those things all rolled together is literally what put me on this path towards creating this podcast, and also creating what I call the activism through coaching model, which is really a way to guide people through having conversations that lead to anti-racism. That is my goal, is to kind of get more and more people to kind of get on this journey towards anti-racism. I actually have a mastermind group that I have that will be rolling out a new session probably sometime later this summer. And the whole idea is just around having people engaged in conversations, courageously engaging in conversations, in real conversations, just like we had today, that enables people to get to know one another across racial lines, across economic lines, across whatever lines that are there that are dividing people up and categorizing and all of that. I wanted to do something that kind of opened up the space for these types of conversations to be had. And like I said, I strongly, strongly believe that racism can be eradicated, and that my precious little boy, my grandson, Cairo, will not have to protest for that birthright, to be able to peacefully and just live in the skin in which he was born. And
could I make one more comment, Anita, when you're done?
Absolutely, go right ahead.
Okay. It just occurred to me that the four of us, I made a comment for Irijah about her fomenting peace by getting to know people and bringing other people to meet even more people. And Gail is working with people as a psychotherapist to calm themselves, to encourage them to breathe. Everything, and you as well, everything that the four of us are doing are about peace, really.
Yes.
I mean, racism is a big chunk of it, but knowing yourself is another big chunk. And just think of when that all catches together, what's possible. Yeah.
Like,
So
in each of us, there's a knowing of what that truth is.
mhm,
And we just have to be willing to do the work to access that
mhm.
and remember that.
Exactly. And as more and more people engage in the conversation,
Yes.
I think that's how things can move forward. I'm going to actually give you all a surprise.
Oh. Oh.
Is he
This is Cairo.
Hi, Cairo.
This is the
Hi,
Cairo that I talk
Hi,
about.
happy birthday.
That I talk about. I
Happy
love this little boy, and look at him. Precious. His birthday was yesterday. Happy birthday.
Did you have a good birthday?
So sweet.
Yes.
Yeah.
I just thought I'd bring him on camera so people will know that I'm not just making this up.
Right, that Cairo's
We have this
real.
precious boy,
Ah,
this precious boy named Cairo. And this
that's
work
beautiful.
that I do all for him.
Amen.
So
Amen.
thank you all for listening. And we'll see you next time on Inflection Point Podcast on transformationtalkradio.com. We are here every first and third Wednesday of the month, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for listening to Inflection Point Podcast, where our mantra is cultivating change from the inside out. The journey towards anti-racism and social change doesn't stop here. Truth, reconciliation, and healing come from ongoing, open, honest, and deliberate conversations. Continue to dive in and deconstruct your thoughts, ideas, and beliefs as we band together to manifest social change. Tune in to Inflection Point Podcast every first and third Wednesday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, here on transformationtalkradio.com for more conversations about how we can cultivate change from the inside out.